All right. Evening, folks. Nice to see everyone. I mean, I see you in other contexts, but nice to be learning together again after a hiatus of a couple of weeks for the various Yom Tevim. And so we'll pick up with our study of the Shir Shel Yom, the daily psalm. So we will be looking at the psalm for Monday. That's Psalm 48. If you have the weekday Siddur, it's page 86. If you have the full Siddur, the older Sim Shalom, it's 24 in in Hebrew, 25 in English. And if you have a different Siddur than either of those, you're on your own. But I'm sure you can figure it out. Um, and just as a reminder, um, the question is raised like not just by us, but raised going back even to the Talmud. Why this particular psalm for this particular day? Um, and the most common explanation is that there is some connection between, right? I mean, there's 7 days of the week, so there's seven daily psalms, and there's 7 days of creation, right? So the most common, and I say the most common because sometimes often people ask me, Rabbi, why do we do this, that, the other thing? And you probably have heard me say at some time over the last 14 years, um, there's no official reason. There are a lot of different explanations. If any of them make sense to you, great. If none of them make sense to you and you want to come up with your own explanation, you're allowed to do that too. Or like just because, that's fine too. All right. So, nowhere in the Talmud does it say we chose this psalm because this reason. But as I say, the most common explanation is that there is a connection of some sort between that particular psalm and um, what happened on that day of creation in the first chapter of Genesis. Sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes it's not so obvious at all. So, as we're working through this psalm, I'd like you to have that in the back of your mind. Like, what is the connection between this psalm and what happened on the second day of creation in the book of Genesis? And maybe just to um, refresh our minds. I wish I'd thought of this before, but because I would have found it. But let let me find quickly um, the second day of creation and read it to you. Okay. Um, All right. So this is Genesis 1, verses 6 through 8. So relatively short day. Okay. God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the water, that it may separate water from water. God made the expanse, and it separated the water which was below the expanse the other translations use the word firmament, okay, where this translation has expanse. The Hebrew word is rakia. Okay, now let me back up again. God made the expanse or the firmament, and it separated the water which was below the expanse from the water which was above the expanse, and it was so. God called the expanse sky, and there was evening and there was morning a second day. Okay. So what happened on the second day is the separation, right? Between so up until then, like the earth is covered with water, and God separates the water into, the water above and the water below with a firmament or the sky in between. That's what happens on the second day. Okay. So again, I'll read the Hebrew and I'll do my own translation with reference to the translation in the Siddur. Um, there are any questions, whatever. We've been doing this a while. All right. Hayom Yom Sheni B'Shabbat. This is the second. Today is the second day of the week. Shabo Hayu Halivriim Omrim Beveit Hamikdash. And on this day, the Levites recited this psalm in the temple. Shir Mizmor Livnei Korach. Okay, a song, a psalm of the sons of Korach. Okay. Questions, comments about just that first line. A song, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Yeah, Toby. And just again, keep on. We're a small group. You can keep unmuted. It's fine.
I just want I would like to know who the sons of Korah were.
Okay.
Korah.
Right. Okay. So the sons of Korah were a clan in the tribe of Levi. They were a subgroup of the family of Kahat, the Kahatim. So that's who they. But what's interesting, right? I mean, the sons of Korah, right? I mean, who was Korah? What do we know about Korah?
Korah disappeared. I mean, he rebelled, and he was killed. He and his total family and descendants. That always puzzled me why we see the sons of Korah when Korah was and his descendants were supposed to be destroyed.
Right. Well, possibly it's a different Korah, right? No, seriously. I mean, there have been, right? There were other cases in the Tanakh where there were, two people, different generations
Right.
with the same name. So, possibly, but possibly not, right? But so Korach was like the the first guy to show up at a board meeting of the shul and say, "You officers are taking too much power for yourself, and it's not fair, and everybody else should have a say also," right? I mean, but seriously, that's in essence what happened, right? Korach was a Levite, and he gathered people around him, and he went to Moses and Aaron, and he said, why do you exalt yourselves over the rest of the people, right? Because all of the people is holy. And I say is, not are, because, right, talking about the right? And right, everybody's holy. We are a holy people, a holy nation. All of the nation are holy. Why do you exalt yourself above everybody else? Right? And then and Moses then proposes like a holiness throwdown, similar to centuries later Elijah and the priests of Baal on Mount Carmel, and says tomorrow everybody bring incense and fire pans, and whoever, like, if God sets your incense on fire, God is picking you. And so that, obviously the Korahites lost, and then the earth opens up and swallows them. Okay, and I mean, I guess Alan, you're the only person present who's actually been the president of the shul. But Leslie's now the senior vice president, and um, I'm sure there were times you probably wished that could happen too, right? That all of these people who are complaining and grumbling, but not offering anything other than complaints and negativity, that the earth would open up and swallow them.
I read the VIII over and over to try to figure out how to do that, and I couldn't figure it out.
No, it's not an instruction manual. You need a book
think
of
of
cover
that
art.
when I'm thinking of the regime that we have. I keep hoping that the earth will open up and swallow them.
That would be nice. um, that would be very nice. I'm so moved. Um, but they were, and later the rabbis really set Korach up to be a demagogue, which he may have been, although his question is not actually illegitimate, right? I mean, Korach was arguing for radical democracy. But what is the line between democracy and populism, right? But I mean, at any rate, and it occurred to me, this psalm, when people, can people do teshuva, right? I mean, so presumably, if these are the descendants of Korach, that people or their descendants can do teshuva, right? And ancestry is not destiny. I mean, certainly, I mean, I remember reading some time ago that, the great, 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 I don't know how many, grandson of Robert E. Lee, is a white Baptist minister who dedicates himself to racial reconciliation. And I mean, people can change, and if these are the descendants of Korah, then then they have changed. Anyway, so Gadol Adonai umihulal ma'od. Great is Adonai and highly to be praised, right? Mihulal, I mean, you might not recognize that word mihulal, but it's a the word hallel and the word hallelujah, and this is like a passive of that. So God is highly praised. Ba'ir Eloheinu Har Kodsho, in the city of our God, his holy mountain, right? Great God, the Lord is great, Adonai is great and highly praised, in the city of our God, his holy mountain. Okay, Yafet Nof. Yafet Nof means like literally a beautiful view. Masos kol haaretz har tzion. the joy of all, the Mount Zion is the joy of all the earth. Yarkate Saphon, sublime on the north. Kiryat Melech Rav, the city of the great king or the great sovereign, right? So we're talking obviously about Jerusalem, right? So the first few verses are, are praise of Jerusalem. Any questions or comments so far? All right. Elohim ba'armenoteha noda lemisgav. God is known in her citadels as a refuge. Okay. And sometimes I have, sometimes when people are reading only the English and they don't really know any Hebrew, and they read this, God is known in her citadels as a refuge, and they're like, whoa, God is described as female all the way as far back as the book of Psalm, right? But that's not, the her does not refer to God. The her refers to Jerusalem, right? Her citadels, meaning the citadels of Jerusalem. So God is known in the citadels as, in the citadels of Jerusalem as a refuge. Ki hine hamalachim noadu avru yachdav. For here the kings conspired, and they advanced all together. Right? The kings conspired and advanced. In other words, the kings got together and they decided to attack Jerusalem. Hema ra'u, they saw. Cain hamahu nivhalu nechpazu. So they came and they saw, and they were astonished, and they trembled and panicked. Right. So right, they thought, we're going to come and we're going to attack Jerusalem, and then they see Jerusalem and they panic. Right? Why? Now, why? Why do they panic when they see Jerusalem?
Was it bigger than they thought?
Not necessarily. Not a question of size, but it's a question of geography, right? I mean, how many of you have been to Jerusalem? Okay.
Beautiful.
Well, it's beautiful, but from a military perspective, and particularly back then, right? Do you want to be up on the top of the hill or at the bottom of the hill? Right?
Absolutely on the top.
Of course.
Right? You
You
want
need
to
to
be
fight
on the
down.
top. Right, exactly. And
Take the high ground.
take the high ground, right? I mean, not the moral high ground, but the literal high ground, right? And no matter where you are going, if you are going to Jerusalem, no matter where in Israel you are going up, right? You are going up, and it is very, very, very difficult to capture because it's high, right? It's high, and then on top of that, you build fortresses, and it becomes impregnable, right? I mean, having said that, look, there there are places that are impregnable and impossible to conquer that are nevertheless conquered, right? I mean, if you've been to Quebec City, right? I would say Quebec City in the 1700s was probably harder to conquer than Jerusalem 3,500 years ago, or even in the right. And nevertheless, the British captured it from the French. So, I mean, you can capture, you can conquer unconquerable cities, but it's not easy. It's not a position that you want to find yourself in, right? So Jerusalem is pretty hard to conquer. Um, Ra'ada achazatam sham, trembling seized them there, like in the approach to Jerusalem. Hil Heyolada. Panic or all right, so it says panic, like you can't always like translate words exactly. Like I translated ra'ada as trembling because that's what it means. Ra'ed is like is to tremble, but here they translate the word heal. All right, but again, so panic sees them trembling like a woman in labor. Okay, so I've never been a woman in labor, so I'm not sure, but probably not a pleasant, fun thing, right? And probably 3,000 years ago, probably even less so, right? So panic sees them, trembling sees them like a woman in labor, right? Beruach kadim tishpor oniot tarshish. They were shattered. I mean, literally, it means with an east wind, you will shatter the ships of Tarshish. But we're not talking about, right? That's an analogy, right? That they were these kings who tried to conquer Jerusalem were analogized to a fleet of ships of Tarshish, Tarshish being like the main port of the Mediterranean at that point. If you remember Jonah, right? Jonah right. He does not want to fulfill the task that God has set to him, so he goes to Jaffa to board a ship to Tarshish, which we're not sure exactly where that was, but probably somewhere in Asia Minor. Um, so these kings were shattered like a fleet destroyed by an east wind. All right. Ka'asher shamanu kain ra'inu, what we once heard, we now have seen. Ba'ir Adonai Tzevaot, in the city of the Lord of hosts. Okay, Adonai Tzevaot is the Lord of hosts, right? Like Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, right? Tzevaot is hosts, meaning like the word for an army in Hebrew is Tzava. Okay, so Tzevaot is the plural, right? So God has many hosts, well, divine, like hosts of angels or whatever, right? So what we once heard, we now have witnessed in the city of Adonai Tzevaot, the Lord of hosts. Be'ir Eloheinu, in the city of our God. Elohim Yehonanei Ha'ad Olam Selah. May God preserve it forever. Um, Diminu Elohim chastecha bekerev heichalecha. We imagine your mercy or your kindness. We meditate upon your kindness in the midst of your sanctuary or your shrine, right? So we go into your shrine and we meditate upon your kindness, your mercy. Kishimcha Elohim kain tehillatcha al kitzvei aretz. As your name, so is your renown to the ends of the earth. Tzedek mala yeminecha. Tzedek means justice, but also victory. Tzedek, right? Your right hand is filled with justice, victory, vindication, righteousness, how, many different ways to translate that word. Yismach Har Tzion Tagelna Benot Yehuda. May Mount Zion rejoice. May the cities of Judah be glad. Laman Mishpatecha, because of your judgments. Now, I want to point out like a sort of technical idiomatic expression, right? All right, so Yismach Har Tzion, may Mount Zion rejoice. Tagelna Benot Yehuda. And says, may the cities of Judah rejoice. But what is the phrase actually? Benot Yehuda, right? Benot Yehuda literally means what? The daughters. The daughters, right? The daughters of Judah, right? So literally, but what? So if it says the daughters of Judah, why does it say the cities of Judah here? Right, and it's not just because they don't want a gendered translation, right? It's because that's actually an idiom. Okay, so benote a certain place, like Gaithersburg is one of the Benote Washington, right? Gaithersburg is one of the daughters of Washington, right? Meaning suburbs, right? The smaller cities, the smaller towns that are dependencies of the larger town. Okay, so Benote Yehuda in this context really does mean, like, let's say daughter cities, right? Or daughter towns, right? It's not talking about like biological daughters. It's talking about dependent cities, tributary cities, perhaps. And it's not, I mean, it's not just in this psalm. It's not uncommon. Okay, so the cities of Judah rejoice because of your judgments, right? Mishpat. Sovu Tzion v'hekifuha. Walk about Zion, encircle her, right? Like hakafot, right? The circles that we walk around the shul with the Torah scrolls on Simchat Torah, right? It's the same word, right? And sobu, like saviv. You might not know the word saviv, but you do what the the Hebrew word for dreidel, right? What's that song? Sevivon tov tov tov, right? Sevivon sov 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 Hanukkah hu hag tov, right? A dreidel is called a sevivon because it spins, it goes around in circles, right? So circle Zion and, walk around her. Sifru migdaleha, count her towers or her fortresses, right? Shitu libchem lechela, right? Count her, literally, like put your hearts on or extend your hearts to her ramparts, but literally, like review, like pay attention. Pasku Armenoteha, scan her citadels. Leman Tisapru Lador Acharon, that you may tell the later generations. Izeh Elohim Eloheinu Olam Va'ed, because this is God, our God, forever or throughout all eternity. Hu Yinahagenu Al Mut. He will guide us. It says forever, but Al Mut means like beyond death, right? Like even beyond our death, God will guide us. Okay, so what does this have to do? I mean, first question, what does this have to do with the second day of creation?
That was going to be my question, because there's no reference to water here or the expanse or
None whatsoever.
The only thing I can think of, and I probably have overthought it, is that the creation story on the second day, God the Almighty separates the firmament, creates firmament upon the water, so that there's a not a structure, but there's the basis for how things are going to proceed. This talks about the firmament, the land of Jerusalem, and how, in other words, what was done with the firmament that was created, and it's a holy city, and that's why these people that were going to attack it and so forth lost their nerve and had issues such as a woman in labor, and then there is the comment that they're shattered like a fleet wrecked by an east wind, and of course that's a reference to water.
Yeah, sure.
And then the idea of the buildings, the ramparts and the citadels that are a part of Jerusalem, and on the glory, the description of how glorious this place is, and that, so I think that's at least somewhere where we're headed.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. I mean, I think I don't say you're right, because who I say right or wrong, right? There's no right or wrong, but I think your theory is plausible, right? I mean, one of the comments that I read on this is, and it resonated for me, because of my fondness for the thought of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, right? But one of the points that he makes, particularly in the dignity of difference, is that, and he is trying to defend particularism as intellectually respectable, right? Because that's the waters that he's swimming in, right? And all of us have to do that, right? I mean, wouldn't it be better if there was only one religion? Or, why are you Jews so stubborn? Why can't you just be like everybody else? Or, whatever. And so Rabbi Sachs points out that the Torah is the creation of the world, and then it is a story up until Abraham. It is the story of humanity, and then it becomes the story of one family, right? And then another comment that I read very recently, which was attributed to, I forget who, but it was a prominent conservative rabbi, that in Genesis, right? So the last few chapters of Genesis, we're still talking about a family, but starting with Exodus, it's a nation, right? We're talking about the nation of the Israelites, or the Hebrews, or the Israelites. And so similarly, right? So on day 2 in the Torah, you've got, right, this separate, right, creation is certainly the second day, right? I mean, in general, by the way, I mean, if you look at Genesis 1, creation is not ex nihilo, right? It is not something from nothing. It is imposition of form on pre-existing matter, right? At the beginning of creation, right, the world is without form and void, right? Meaning it exists. It's just chaos, right? And God's act of creation is imposition of order on chaos, right? And then day 2, God doesn't create anything. God doesn't create anything on day 2. He just separates.
Yeah.
Right? He separates the waters into, water in the sky and water below, right?
Well,
So
why do you say it was chaos? It was just water.
no, the Hebrew, I mean, it says day 2 it's just water, but day 1 it's chaos. It's tohu vavohu, which means chaos.
But out of the does he make water out of the chaos? I don't understand what you
No,
know.
the water's there. The water's there. The water's already existing on day 1.
Okay.
Bereshit bara Elohim et haaretz v'haaretz, right? Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz v'haaretz hayta tohu v'chovu v'choshech al panei pehom v'ruach Elohim merachep el. Right. So God, the world was without form and void. That's tohu v'vohu. The choshech al panei tahom, darkness covered the depths. The ruach Elohim merachepet al pnei hamayim, the spirit of God hovered above the face of the water. That's on day 1. So the water's already there, right? The water's already there, but on day 2, God separates. And that's all God does, right? That God's creation on day 2 is merely an act of separation, right? So, all right, so what does this have to do with Jerusalem? Well, like Aaron, like you said, right? Like, so if God is creating, let's say, I mean, the land actually isn't until the next day, but the groundwork is laid for land on day 2, right? And so, in other words, this is a particular of the general of day 2, right? It's a particular of the general of day 2. And that's fine, right? I mean, because we go from the general to the particular, right? But other than that, I mean, I personally don't see a lot of connection between this psalm and day two, right? Other than, like I say, like a particularization of what is general in on day two of Genesis 1, right? Um, any other questions or comments on this? Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, Rabbi, but that still doesn't get to what I've always wondered about when I've seen this, and that why is it a psalm of the sons of Kovash, of
Sure.
Korah? And it just does not. I mean, you can try to spin it, but it just doesn't work for me. And there must have been you've obviously done some research, so there must be some commentators on that. Why would they use that name of all the names they could use?
I have not found much, okay, but honestly, I mean, my research has been fairly cursory on this particular question. So when I said it could be a different Korach, I mean, it really could be. I mean, all I found is that the B'nai Korach were a subgroup of the clan of the Kahatim, who are a family within the Levites. That's all I found. I've not found anything else. Other than, look, I mean, so if they're Levites, then any song about Jerusalem is appropriate, right? I mean, their function is in the temple on Mount Zion, and that's enough.
All right, I'm spinning right now on I'm rifting, but it's the sons of Korah, and the real sin of a Korah is that they don't have the interest of the organization at heart. They really just have their own interest at heart. They can play the game. They can be what do you call rabble rousers, but they really are not doing it for the benefit of the organization. They're doing it for their own benefit or for the benefit of somebody else.
Right.
In this psalm, they talk about these kings that conspired and advanced, and they were going to do harm to Jerusalem.
Right.
That is in the spirit of Korah. They weren't doing that in order to protect all of humanity. They were doing that for their own reasons. And that may be a part of this, but I think that may be a little too far out.
That's a stretch only because I mean there's a difference. Like, these kings they're external enemies, right? Korach is an internal enemy. So I'm not, so I think that's a stretch. But because here we're really talking about like enemy aliens, right? Not right. We're talking about enemy aliens. We're not talking about internal domestic terrorists, like all of us. All right. So let's go on, because the next time we may not finish it, but that's okay. But the psalm for Thursday. So this is Psalm 82. And again, so they're not in order, right? They are not in like numerical order, because we went from 48 to 82, and then we'll go to 94, and then back to 81. But I love this psalm. I don't know that it's my favorite, but it's one of. my favorites. Okay, so Mizmor LaAsaf, a psalm of Asaph. Um, Elohim nitzav ba'adat el, bekerev Elohim yishbot. Okay, so now this is not easy to translate. Okay, even though like each word is easy, but conceptually it's not necessarily. Okay, so God rises. Okay, so that's easy. Elohim nitzav, God rises. But adat el. Okay. Adah, right? Adah is like a congregation, right? So Adat El, the congregation, literally, right? I mean, Adat El, congregation of God, right? But well, the point is that the word El or Elohim in the Bible has many different meanings. Okay, and it's not always clear what meaning is referred to in any particular context, because El could mean a god, or it could mean a judge, or it could mean a mighty person, right? But so God, like the way I read this, all right, so let me finish the whole sentence. Elohim nitzav ba'adat el, God rises in the all right, so it says in the courts of the mighty. We'll leave it at that for now. The Kerev Elohim Yishbot, pronouncing judgment upon judges. Okay, and so here you see that word Elohim, right, which normally we would translate as God, is being translated here as judges, because Yishbot is he will judge, right? So I kind of see this actually as God. So who the courts of the mighty, right? I don't think so, actually. I mean, I see this in my mind's eye as God going into the boardroom of, the God corporation or the society of gods, right? And judging all those other gods, right? Because I have spoken about the concept of henotheism. Okay, henotheism, right? In other words, I absolutely believe that our ancestors were not originally monotheists. Okay, they were henotheists or monolatrists. In other words, what does that mean? There are many gods, we worship only one. Okay, there are many gods, we worship only one, either the God of our land or the God of our tribe or the God of our family, right? So I personally, and it's not just me, I mean, I studied this psalm in depth in rabbinical school with Professor Matit Yahud Sevat, who was, one of the real, like, world experts on the Psalms. And Professor Savat sees this psalm, and who am I to disagree, as marking sort of the transition from monolatry, meaning we worship only one God, to monotheism, right? There is only one God, right? That all those other alleged gods are no gods, right? So, and I think if you look at it makes sense, right? So God is, now, having said that, given the utter corruption of the Supreme Court, right? It is attractive in a way to read this as God pronouncing judgment upon the judges,
Mhm.
right? And so certainly, I mean, there's a deep relevance for us today, right? But and again, I mean, it is a mistake to think that a psalm or any other piece of biblical writing can have only one meaning, right? I mean, it meant one thing then, it means something else now, and certainly as long as the different meanings are like consistent with each other, that's fine, right? So I see this as God judging. He's not pronouncing judgment upon judges. He's pronouncing judgment upon the other gods. Right? He's pronouncing judgment upon the other gods. And I have now realized that you other gods are not gods at all. Right? How do I know? Because of your behavior, right? As a great rabbi of roughly 2,000 years ago said, by your fruits shall you know them, right? Ad matai tishbatu avel. How long will you pervert judgment or justice? How long will you pervert judgment? Justice, it's a good translation. Ufne rishaim tisu sela, that you lift up or exalt the face of the wicked, right? Meaning you favor the wicked. How long will you pervert justice and favor the wicked, right? That's how I know that you're not really gods, because you pervert justice and favor the wicked in judgment, right? Which real gods wouldn't do, right? But that's what you do, right? What should you be doing instead? Shiftu dal v'yatom, champion the core cause of the weak and the orphan. Ani virash hatstiku, judge in favor of the poor and the downtrodden. Paltu dal evyon, rescue or help to flee. Like this word paltu, like in modern Hebrew, the word plitim are refugees. Okay, so rescue the weak and the needy. Miyad Rishaim Hatzilu, save them from the hand of the wicked, right? This is what real gods do, which you are not doing, right? Which is how I know that you are false and phony and MAGA gods and not real gods, right? No, that's what it is, right? I mean, if you are favoring the wicked instead of the downtrodden and the needy, your religion is phony, and you're a phony God, and you're a phony judge, right? Because that's not what real gods do, and it's not what real judgment does, and it's not what real religion is about, right? Lo yadu velo yavinu, but they know and understand nothing. B'chashecha yitalechu, they walk about in darkness. Yimotu kol mostei aretz, until all the foundations of the world are shaken, right? These false, phony gods, they know nothing, right? They know nothing. They walk around in darkness. Ani amarti Elohim atem uvnei elyon kulhem. I said to myself, you are gods, children of the Most High. That's what I thought. But achen ka'adam tamutu, but you will die like mortals. Uche'ahad hasarim tipol, you will fall like one of the princes, right? Huma Elohim shoftah haaretz, arise, O God, and judge the earth. Ki ata tinchal bechol hagoyim, for your dominion is above all nations, right? I mean, this psalm should be tattooed on the
Yeah.
forehead of many people in this country.
Yes.
But that's what it means. So that let's look. I mean, we're almost out of time, but let's look at day 3. All right. God said, "Let the water below the sky be gathered into
Rabbi,
one
before you
area
do that,
the
can
dry."
can
Yeah.
I just say one thing? I cheated. I used my phone, and it's the sons of Korath. The reference there, because that really I didn't understand, but they said that supposedly descendants of Korath sort of were redeemed in that they became psalmists and
Right.
and singers in the temple and composed many psalms. So that's why it says, I believe, the a song of Korath, a song of
Right.
the sons of Korath, because these were the descendants. And I
Right. Of course.
apologize
Yeah.
for interrupting, but I thought I'd mention that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So go back to day 3. Because I have to say I don't see any connection. Okay. God said, "Let the water below the sky be gathered into one area that the dry land may appear," and it was so. God called the dry land earth and called the gathering of water seas, and God saw that this was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, seed bearing plants, fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it," and it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, seed bearing plants of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that this was good. And there was evening and there was morning, a third day. Okay, now I will just quickly point out that on day 2, God does not say it's good. But on day 3, God says it was good twice. Um, but basically, God creates land and vegetation on day 3. I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, because I said facetiously, because I said a great rabbi said, because it was Jesus who said, right? By their fruits you shall know them, right? And here it's talking about day 3, fruits, right? And so I mean, I can see in the sense that we judge people by what they do, not by what they say, right? And these, whether they're gods or judges or princes or whoever, their fruits are evil. They are producing evil. But other than that, I'm not sure I see much of a connection between this psalm and day 3 in Genesis at all, frankly. But
Rabbi,
yeah, so
I have a question. Were these psalms for each day in place for the first temple as well as the second temple? Do we know?
we don't know. I mean, the Mishnah assumes that to be the case. But that doesn't mean that we know that it was. Yeah, I mean, I think we can be pretty confident that they were in place in the second temple. But I mean, the first temple, I mean, not a lot is really known about, what went on in the first temple, really.
Thank you.
All right, sure. All right. Good night. We got 2 Psalms done tonight, so that's good. Albeit the second one pretty short, but worthwhile. And
Rella,
thank you.
one
Yeah.
thought is that the words that they have here, if we had somebody who was a visiting clergy from the Christian religion, they would find a lot of the Christ legend right here. I mean, that's really the basis, I think, of much of their ethics and their
No,
teachings.
absolutely. I mean, there's not, there nothing more frustrating, for when I hear a Christian, as Jesus said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Yes, Jesus definitely said that, right? Uh, Quoting the Torah, which he knew quite well,
Right.
right? I mean, there's not a lot in Christianity that wasn't already
That's right.
found in Judaism. And and so there's absolutely, right? I mean, there is a continuity as well as a discontinuity, right? But it's kind of a facile, but I've heard many people say, and I could say it myself if in a context where I wasn't, where either I wasn't I wasn't afraid of causing offense, or I didn't mind causing offense, right? Is that there is a difference between the religion of Jesus and the religion about Jesus,
Oh, absolutely.
right? And I fully endorse the religion of Jesus. Um, I have issues with the religion about Jesus, right? And frankly, right, and I've said, particularly when I was more involved in in interfaith, if if Jesus showed up, right? If Jesus showed up in Montgomery County tomorrow, well, first of all, I mean, he'd be detained by ICE, but if he managed to avoid being detained by ICE and he was looking to worship, where would he go? He would look for a synagogue. He would
That's
not
right.
look for a church, right? He didn't know from churches. But yeah, so absolutely. I mean, there is, no, and that's why I feel the right to get angry at people like J.D. Vance, right? I mean, no, seriously, because they are situating themselves in the same moral tradition where we live, right? And they just don't get it, right? They just don't get it. And if, as opposed to Trump, right? I mean, he is who he is, right? And yes, he may say that he's the greatest, but no, everybody knows that's baloney, right? Right? No, I mean, Trump makes no when people talk about, oh, he's a great Christian, like, all right, where did he go to church on Christmas? Right? I mean, but J.D. Vance wraps himself in the mantle of religiosity, right, in ways that Trump does not. Um, and, I mean, they are the ones who are infuriating. I mean, I had this discussion with Kip, because I really don't. I mean, Trump is who he is. I said, let's imagine. I mean, I don't know. Some of you know our next door neighbor, the McDougalls, right? I said, if the McDougalls decided to get a pet tiger, and the pet tiger escaped and started eating people in the neighborhood, whose fault is that? Is it the fault of the tiger? No, it is the fault of the McDougalls, right? And so, I don't, I mean, to my mind, John Roberts and Mitch McConnell are far more culpable than Donald Trump,
That's right.
because he is who he is, and you know what you're getting with him. And he is the tiger, but the people who are responsible, it's not the tiger, it's the people who bring the tiger into the house, into the neighborhood, and then the tiger starts eating people. They're the ones who are culpable. So, anyway, sorry. Not sorry.
Rabbi, thank you.
Anyway,
Interesting
good
session.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Live with Tov.
Live Tov.